Hello, I'm Ray with another podcast episode. This time, looking back to the late 60s, early 70s and the aristocracy. Now, I knew a family. Well, no, I didn't know the family. That's not true. There was a house just outside the village. Everyone called it the Big House. And that's where Lord and Lady Harrington lived. That's a name that I've just used. To be honest, I forget their name. I was going to change it to protect their identity, but I forget their name anyway. So Lord and Lady Harrington lived in the Big House. No one knew them from the village. We didn't know who they were. We didn't know anything about them, other than the fact that they were obviously millionaires. They were ultra rich. They were the aristocracy. And we were in the village, we were the plebs. We were the commoners. So that's the scene set, the big house up the hill outside the village. Now, I met a girl, very nice girl, called Elizabeth, and we got on quite well. She wasn't from the village. She lived somewhere outside, I don't know, probably the town, I thought at the time. And we got on very well. We went out for a few weeks, and she said she had a live-in job. Now, you're probably guessing already, if she's got a live-in job, it's obviously the big house, which it was. She said she was a maid. And I was quite interested in this. She wouldn't say where at first, but I guessed. I said, well, the only sort of live-in job around here would be the big house. It did have a name, but I can't remember, Manor something or something Manor. But there was nowhere else that I could think of where they would have live-in staff. Actually, I've just remembered the name. Yeah, Lord and Lady, but I won't mention that. Now, Elizabeth and I got on extremely well. We had a lot in common. We chatted about, I used to like walks in the woods. She loved all that sort of thing. A lot of woodland round the village, and especially around the big house just outside the village. One day she said, do you want to come up to the house? Meet me there. And I said, well, what if I'm caught? I said, you'll get the sack. No. She said, there's an entrance round the back. And I said, oh, that's nice, the tradesman's entrance. She said, no, there's another entrance that's very rarely used, if ever. So she told me exactly where to go and what time. I found the small door at the back of the house. I had to climb over a wall and sneak through the gardens. Luckily I wasn't seen. It was the back of the house and there were a lot of bushes there. I found the door. She let me in. We went up these sort of back stairs, very narrow sort of stone steps, up to a corridor, which is obviously the first floor corridor of the house. A huge house it was. And she led me into a room. A lovely bedroom. And I said, wow, whose room is this? This is nice. She said, it's mine. I said, well, you're the maid. I said, how come they've given you a room like this? Had lovely furniture, carpet, beautiful curtains. It was I don't know when the house was built, but very high ceilings, huge, thick velvet curtains. I just found it incredible. And I said how come they let a maid have a room like this? Maids were normally shoved up in the attic. They had attic rooms, didn't they? I questioned her further because I just couldn't believe. I mean, the carpet, a thick plush carpet, everything sort of oozed money, if you know what I mean. And in the end, she said, okay. She said, look, between you and me, don't tell anyone. Don't tell a soul. I am Lord and Lady Harrington's daughter. And I said, daughter? But you're the maid. She said, yes, I act as the maid. She said, we haven't got a maid. The maid left because we didn't pay her. And I'm thinking, what is going on here? How come that the daughter is acting as the maid? She explained that her father had had a lot of trouble, a lot of bad luck on the stock exchange, the stock market. I don't know anything about it. I didn't then and I don't now. And she didn't. She just said that basically all the money was lost on the stock exchange. They couldn't pay the maid, so she left. The butler hadn't been paid for a year. He was just working as a butler for no money. I mean, he had his keep, he had his room, and he had food, so he had somewhere to live. But he wasn't getting any money. And she said when they have visitors, such as other members of the aristocracy, I presumed, they had to have a maid. So she'd quickly put on the maid's uniform and play the part. Now, there's a lot more to this story, which I shall tell you in a minute, but you're probably wondering what this is all about. What's this got to do with then and now, the old days, the 60s, early 70s, and today? What's it all about? Back then, if you had a criminal record, for example, there was a real stigma attached to it. If you were made bankrupt back in the 60s, early 70s. That really was, there was a stigma around that. It was dreadful. Anyone that was made bankrupt, it was absolutely dreadful. These days, it doesn't matter. In fact, I know three people, I think, that have been made bankrupt. All it did was help them out with their debts, and that's it, end of. No one thinks, oh, goodness me, how bad that is. No one's bothered anymore. But back then, things like that mattered. And as Elizabeth explained to me, there was the family name, there was the reputation. The family name was very important. It mustn't be sullied. There could be no scandal. You couldn't have anything like that surrounding these families in the big houses, the aristocracy. I said to her that if money really is that short, why not sell some of the furniture? I mean, some of the furniture in her room, there was a chaise longue, antiques. And she said, no, you're talking a few £100. That's no good. She said, even if we get a few £1,000s from furniture and paintings, that's not enough. It might pay a few things, but then where'd you go? A couple of weeks' time, there's more money you need. There's more bills, there's more money needed. That wouldn't work. And also, as she said, people would notice. You start selling furniture, paintings, people that visited the house would notice. They all look out for that sort of thing. How are they doing? How's Lord and Lady so-and-so do? Oh, I've heard a rumour they sold the Rolls Royce. Goodness me, they're obviously in trouble. And word gets round. It's all terrible. Apparently her father, Elizabeth's father, Lord Harrington, he was something in the city. I don't know what that means. Something to do, obviously, with stocks and shares, but he was something in the city. He had friends in high places. The slightest rumour going around that he is in money trouble, money problems, then that would be absolutely, it would be in the newspapers, it would be dreadful. So it was all a big secret. I was surprised she told me, actually. There was one evening I'd gone round to her room and we were just having a chat and a drink when her mother called her. I looked round wondering what to do. I couldn't go out into the corridor, the window. We were on the first floor. I couldn't go out of the window. And she said, the bed, under the bed. I dived under the bed and her mother came in, very well spoken. Oh, Elizabeth, I'm off to work now. And I thought, work? Off to work? And Elizabeth said, yes, all right, mother, that's fine. See you later. From under the bed, I just about glimpsed her mother's face as she was standing by the door and she just turned to leave. I saw her face. I knew her. This was incredible. I actually knew her. When she'd gone, I came out from under the bed. I didn't say anything to Elizabeth. But her mother, who I knew as Jennifer, worked in the local hotel. I say local, it was again just outside the village. There was a lovely hotel. It was actually a pub and hotel, restaurant, a very large place, very posh. But the bar was open to the public, and I used to go in there with a few friends now and then, and I knew her mother. She worked on reception. And I knew her, as I say, as Jennifer, on reception. I just couldn't believe that they were that broke, that even the daughter had to play the part of the maid. The mother was receptionist in a hotel. How short of money were they? As far as I was aware, no one in the village knew the family from the big house. I suppose that's how Jennifer got away with working at the hotel. No one knew her anyway, so they wouldn't know that she was Lady Harrington from the big house. I didn't say anything to Elizabeth, but what I did do the following evening, I went to the hotel, to the pub, and Jennifer was there, and she said, oh, hello, Ray. She was very well spoken. Hello, Ray. I said, hello, Jennifer, how are you? And she said, oh, yeah, fine. We had a bit of a chat. She played the part of the receptionist very well. No one would ever have guessed that she was Lady Harrington from the big house. But, of course, I knew. And I was dying to tell my friends, but I couldn't. I daren't say anything, because I had been sworn to secrecy by Elizabeth. I saw Elizabeth several times, went to the house. Sometimes we'd go out for a drink. In fact, we were getting on very well, becoming very close. And I started to wonder about the future. Now, this obviously was going to present difficulties. You can't have a member of the aristocracy, Lord and Lady so-and-so's daughter, going out with a commoner from the village. But there was a major problem. Now, I went along to the pub, and Jennifer was there, and we were chatting. I'd always got on very well with her. In fact, now, this is where things become complicated. I'd been going out with Jennifer on the odd occasion for several months. Only out now and then she'd pick me up in her car or we'd meet somewhere. I'd never picked her up. I didn't know where she lived. Well, I didn't then, I do now. I didn't know where she lived. We'd either meet in the lane somewhere or she'd pick me up from my place and we'd go out, we'd have a meal somewhere. It was always way out of the village. I did used to wonder why. I had an idea she was married. She looked a lot younger than her age. She looked early 30s. I was, mid-20s? She looked early 30s, so there wasn't that much of a gap. Elizabeth, by the way, her daughter was I think she was 20. Yeah, she was 20. I remember her telling me 21st birthday the following year. Now, Jennifer and I had got on very well. As I say, I had an idea she was married and I was just sort of a bit of rough on the side because she was always so posh, always so well dressed. You could see her jewellery wasn't fake stuff. It was genuine and it was expensive. Now, when I was chatting to her in the bar, she took me to one side. She said, come out through, there was a corridor place. She said, come out, I want to talk to you. She said, I know about you and Elizabeth. My immediate thought was, oh dear, that's the end of Elizabeth and my relationship with her. That's the end of that. She also said, now you obviously know who I am, which I did, of course. I said, yes, you're Elizabeth's mother. You are Lady Harrington. I just didn't know what to think. I just didn't know what to think, what to say. But she said, I hope this doesn't affect our relationship. I was stunned. I said, what, you don't mind my seeing your daughter and seeing you at the same time? And she looked round, she looked very guilty. She said, we get on very well. And I said, we do. I said, well, so do Elizabeth and I. We get on very well. And she said, I don't want what we've got spoilt, especially at a time like this when money is very tight. She said, I know that you know all about that. I've overheard you two talking. My thought then was, if her father found out, if Elizabeth's father, Jennifer's husband, if he found out I was seeing not only his daughter but his wife, all hell would be let loose. I just didn't know what. I just said, look, let's leave it. I didn't know what to say. I didn't know what to think. I said, let's leave it for a minute. I need to think about this. I'd known all along, all over the previous months, that Jennifer and I were just nothing. We were just it was a physical thing. We just met now and then, and that was it. There was never going to be any future in that. She told me she was 40. She looked a lot younger, as I said. But I had thought with Elizabeth that there might be some future in it. The situation had reached the point where I thought it was probably best to leave both of them and just move away from the big house. Don't go near there. Don't go near the pub. But what occurred to me was the hypocrisy. All this about the aristocracy and about the family name. There was, I don't know, it was just mind-blowing at the time. You know, the mother was seeing me, the daughter was seeing me, the father had lost all the money on the stock exchange. They had the family name, all this about the family name. They couldn't have anything dragged through the mud. The butler hadn't been paid for a year. The daughter was acting as the maid because the maid had left because she wasn't paid. Hypocrisy was rife in the family. But isn't that always the way with the aristocracy? Or the hypocrisy? I don't know. I've never met any other aristocratic type people. But I was in a fantastically complex situation. And as I said, I wondered whether to walk away. Well, I didn't want to walk away from either of them, to be honest. I carried on seeing Elizabeth. I carried on, well, I won't say sneaking up to her room. Her father was up in London most of the time trying to sort out financial problems. So there was only her mother in the house. Oh, and the butler. So I used to just sort of wander in the back way and go up to Elizabeth's room. We'd meet in there. I don't think Elizabeth knew that her mother knew about me and all this sort of thing, all these mind games. Elizabeth didn't know that her mother knew about us. So that was all right. And her mother was very good. She let me come and go as I pleased, basically. I don't want you to get the wrong idea. I'd been seeing Elizabeth, but not her mother at the same time. I hadn't seen her mother for weeks, apart from the odd chat in the pub. So I wasn't sort of two-timing and all that business. But when her mother came to me one evening at the house, as I was leaving, she was waiting outside. unbeknown to Elizabeth and myself. She said, I need to see you. Tomorrow night I'll pick you up, 7 o'clock. And I said, oh, hey, hang on. And she said, no, we need to talk. So I thought, well, fair enough if she just wants to talk. But I didn't want anything else going on. Because I didn't want to, first of all, cheat on Elizabeth. Because what we had was good, even though there's probably no future in it. I just didn't want to cheat on her and mess her about, especially with her mother. When Jennifer picked me up, we drove out into the woods. There was a car park where we used to go sometimes. And she said, right, this is the situation. And I thought, well, how come she's dictating to me? Again, I suppose that's the aristocracy. She said, this is how it's going to be. You will carry on seeing my daughter. You will carry on seeing Elizabeth. But you will also see me when I need you. I said, no, hang on, Jennifer, we can't do this. It's not fair on Elizabeth. She said, my husband's come into money again. We are now solvent. We've paid all our debts. And I said, well, how's that? Where do you get all the money from all of a sudden? Oh, that's the way it is, she said. You wouldn't understand. Now, that was condescending. You wouldn't understand. That's the way it is in high society and finance and business. She was rambling on. And I thought, good grief. She's changed. Now the money's all back again. She's changed. But she still wanted to see me on the odd occasion. And I said, no, I'm not going to do that. She said, OK, you won't see Elizabeth then. Now, that was a bit of a blow. So I said, no, you're not going to blackmail me like this with your daughter. I said, that's just totally unfair. That's the way it works, she said. That's the way it works. Take it or leave it. My brush with the aristocracy was rather strange, to say the least. They are so different. I've heard people say, oh, it's different, people that are stinking rich in big houses. They live in another world. It's so different. One rule for them, one rule for us. I don't know whether I thought that or not. I just found her to be so, dictatorial. She was in charge. Everyone had to do as she said. It was most peculiar experience. An experience that I don't regret having, because I think all experiences in life are of some value, even bad ones, good and bad, are of some value. I did see Elizabeth, and her mother didn't stop me. I did see Elizabeth for quite a few months after that. Her mother backed off. Eventually her father, Elizabeth's father, he discovered me, so I put it that way, sneaking in through the back way of the house, creeping up the stairs and going into his daughter's bedroom. He was not amused. We are not amused. I was thrown out. Of course, Jenny denied all knowledge of me, hadn't got a clue who I was when he confronted her. Elizabeth had to end our relationship. It was all very sad. I did hear later that Elizabeth married into money, as the family obviously wanted. I did hear that Jennifer became pregnant, but not by her husband. There we are, not by Lord Harrington. I won't go into all the details of that, but again, she used to talk to me about breeding, how it's got to be good breeding stock and interbreeding and all this sort of thing that went on in these big country houses. I was quite amazed by the whole thing, actually. I did have it on good authority that she was pregnant by someone else. So Jenny, I call her Jenny, that's how it was in the end. It was Jennifer. I did discover that was actually her real name. I would have thought working in the hotel she would have changed her name, but she was Jennifer or Jenny. She'd always wanted a son. Her husband didn't want any more children. He just looked upon them as expensive commodities that didn't really interest him. So she went and actually had a son in the end by someone else. So she got what she wanted. As for me, well, I don't know. I look back upon the whole thing with interest, no regrets, just a learning curve, as they say these days. But what I do wonder is, what's the aristocracy doing now? These big houses up the hill where they've got a maid. And I would go back to Victorian times. The master of the house would have his wicked way with the maid. And if she got pregnant, she'd be thrown out. It was all her fault. I wonder whether that still goes on. Interesting stuff. Very interesting stuff. Thanks for listening. See you next Sunday. Bye-bye for now.